Before we get into SmackDown, there is some news since we last signed off several hours ago. PWInsider.com's Mike Johnson reporting that Cody Rhodes has signed with WWE. The report states that he signed roughly 10 to 14 days ago, is expected to debut WrestleMania weekend, and it would seem like this is the plan with Cody Rhodes and Seth Rollins, and the indication is like Cody Rhodes debuting at WrestleMania, not seeing him on TV beforehand. That could always change if they feel he's needed beforehand, but that looks to be the direction from all indicators with Seth Rollins, and I think most people figured that Cody coming in, that's the obvious slot that he will be filling.
Mm-hmm. Interesting that, if the report is true and if they stick to this plan of not introducing Cody until WrestleMania, it's an interesting tactic, and maybe kind of shows, how much they value Cody, perhaps, to save him and think of him as a big enough draw that he would make a difference without making any sort of appearance on TV. Perhaps, they're doing their own rendition of, the CM Punk First Dance debut. We'll see how much they actually explicitly say that, he will appear, or if they'll be very subtle about it.
Do you think they should make mention, or not make mention of it outright, but the Punk thing, it was like, he's going to be there.
Yeah, I think it's worth trying, John, but especially when you're talking about an
you
AEW.
want people to know this guy is here, and if you don't think this guy means something, then that's a larger question. But to me, it's like you value someone. Like, I think you want it out there. You don't have to explicitly state it, but I think you want your audience to know. You tune into the show, you're getting Cody Rhodes.
Yeah. So I think what would be interesting to see is if they, I wouldn't say not announce it at all. But I think to heavily hint at it the way AEW did with CM Punk's return, I think I'd be very curious to see WWE's rendition of that, because they're not a company that is known at all for its subtlety. So can they handle, what is, at least in pro wrestling terms, a bit of a subtle hinting at a debut, and how will the audience react to it?
Yeah, I could see several scenarios. The one that they're playing right now is Rollins going right up until WrestleMania with no opponent, and you tune into WrestleMania to see how this guy gets on the show, and you get a big payoff. The other is that Go Home Raw is that Rollins is at the end of his rope. He fails on his last attempt, something you come up with on that last Raw. He fails, and he just makes the call out, and that's your final thing on Raw to go into WrestleMania. He just calls out Cody by name to show up that weekend. And everyone goes nuts. You get that buzz that week. That's another alternative of where you could go. But I think if you're WWE, I think you want this to be circulating. You want people to know that they're getting the arrival at WrestleMania.
Yeah, so much of the tactic seems to be these days to make last-minute announcements, to make staggered announcements and to make a very last-minute
Will they drop this on Twitter the day of WrestleMania?
Maybe 2 hours before WrestleMania. That's when you'll get that Seth Rollins promo. But if the report is true that he signed 2 weeks ago,
it tells you, obviously they forewent Jacksonville on Monday. They've got Chicago on Monday, and then wherever Raw is for the go home show. But I would say if they had him pen to paper and they went through Jacksonville and they're doing this story with Seth, that would tell me they're going right up until WrestleMania with this story.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how they handle it.
Mike Johnson also noting that, and again, things could always change, but earmarked for the Raw brand.
That would make sense. Seth is on the show, so yeah.